A very good morning to all of you. So, day before yesterday's session, we had basically taken up the second type of questions that are asked and how we are supposed to address that very question. Okay, so we in the last session we took up a very structured understanding of how to answer those questions which are primarily based on applied ethics. Okay, if you remember, or let me just recall that idea. Let me just in the next slide give you an overview related to how you are supposed to write that. Okay, like what are the things that we had discussed? What are the things that we had discussed? We had seen that whenever there is a question that is asked on applied ethics, we are generally, the question would be framed in a manner where what we would be supposed to do is we would be supposed to follow a specific pattern. And what would be that pattern? The pattern would be that when it comes to the introduction of my question, would be an explanation of what is it? That means which aspect of applied ethics are we talking about? Like it could be related to technology, it could be related to environment, it could be related to media, etc. So the very first thing that we have to talk about is this aspect. And again, in the introduction itself, what I can, in addition to that, do is I can explain what. That means what issue are we talking about? So the question related to applied ethics will always be related to a specific issue. So if it is asking about artificial intelligence, so there may be a question related to ethical problems or ethical concerns of artificial intelligence. Or if there is a question related to media, so there would be a question related to integrity of media, something like this. So that what issue is what I introduce in the introduction itself. Okay. Then comes the body part of my answer. And in the body part of my answer, what do I do? Now, the very first paragraph that is there, it is the explanation of that issue. It's an explanation of that issue. It's an explanation of the issue. Okay. So here there is a possibility that you maybe get into the how aspect. So what we have dealt with in the introduction itself, how is that, how is that two issues correlated? You may write in the very first paragraph. In the second paragraph, we talked about ethical principles. Okay. Ethical principles. So if there is an issue that is there, so how is the issue may be related to or violation of certain ethical principles, maybe the principles such as justice, equality, etc. You would introduce these principles as a part of the body in the in the second paragraph of the body. And in the third paragraph, you can give examples, and along with examples, what you can also do is maybe add the contemporary relevance. The contemporary relevance. Okay. You can write about the contemporary relevance of it. So if it is, suppose, a question on media ethics, you can do what? You can specifically talk about, that today there is a problem related to integrity of media. So you can write about that, and maybe present some examples. If there are some instances, some cases which have come to light, which is emphasizing and which is raising that issue of integrity, introduce that in the third part of the, or the third paragraph of your body. And then comes the conclusion part of it, and the conclusion part of it is always something that needs to be balanced. So there is a balanced perspective. The balanced perspective is required, and therefore in order to ensure this balanced perspective, what you do is either you write suggestions. So if there are some problems that exist, you can do what? You can address those problems by writing suggestions to address them. And can how can certain suggestions be given so that these problems can we can overcome those problems. So if you are talking about, suppose again take an example of media ethics. So if you are talking about media ethics, what you can do is you can write what according to you should be the code of conduct that should be followed by the media, or can there be some government intervention related to by through enactment of maybe a code of conduct, maybe a code of ethics for the media houses. How can there be ensured that media integrity is maintained? Maybe does it require some specific steps taken for the accountability of the media houses? So should the government introduce certain laws for it? So something like this is what you write in the suggestions part. Or you can do what? If you are writing some things positives, there are also positives. So in that case you can balance it. How? By providing an alternative perspective, which means the negatives or the criticisms part. Okay, so you can introduce the criticisms part also, and by doing this, what will be the consequence of it? You will be able to balance your answer. Okay, so the last session which was held day before yesterday, in that last session, this is what I had discussed, what I have just mentioned. There I discussed it in details, and I also took up certain examples to explain each and every of this point that I have just mentioned. So if you have not no gone through that session, obviously this the 10 minutes discussion that we just had cannot it cannot replace the 1 hour discussion that we had in the last session. So if you have not seen the last session, please go back, see the fourth session related to fourth part of ethics answer writing, and there you will get to know in details what are the things that I had discussed. Okay, today what I'm going to do is we are going to look at this very in a practical perspective. Okay, how do I do that? So what I do is I take up some questions related to what has been asked previously. So I will take up a question of what no applied ethics question was asked in the year 2024, what applied ethics question was asked in the year 2025, and we will try and see how can we address use this idea and address those questions. Okay, okay, this is basically what is our agenda for today. Okay, now let's come to the question itself without wasting our time. Let's directly get into the question per se. First, let's look at a question which was asked in the year 2024. Okay, and the question that was asked in the year 2024, and this is also going to be the first question this year as well. I'm not saying the question will be the same, but applied ethics in the last 2 years, UPSC has developed this trend that the very first question that they asked is generally a question of applied ethics. Okay, so you can expect this trend to continue. It is of course up to UPSC whether they want to change it or they want to continue it, but according to me, this is the trend that should continue. Okay, so what was the question? The question was the application of application of artificial intelligence as a dependable source as a dependable source as a dependable source of input of input for administrative for administrative rational decision making, rational rational decision making, the rational decision making, okay, full stop. Critically examine the statement, critically examine the statement. Okay, this is the, no, this is basically the question that was asked. What is, no, what is the demand? If you, no, if you try and read the question well, you will not only understand what is the demand of this question, but you are also likely to understand what is generally the way UPSC asks its questions. Like, we generally, whenever we are basically preparing such topics, we tend to look at it from this perspective that, okay, artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence has certain ethical issues or ethical concerns. Absolutely fine. But the question does not demand that. The question here demands that when we use artificial intelligence as what? When we use artificial intelligence as an input in administrative decision making, then can there be some critical issues, or can there be some problems, or what are the positives? Because it says critically examine. So it is not just what is the issue related to artificial intelligence. The question demands you write how, if artificial intelligence is an input in administrative decision making, then what could be the problems or what could be the positives related to it? Okay. So as we have already seen introduction, so how do I introduce this particular question? Let's follow the same pattern, and you now will be a judge of it, that when we follow the pattern that we have discussed, the same structure that we have discussed, so does it, no, does it positively impact my answer? Does it bring more quality to my answer? Does it make my answer more substantive? And does it make my answer more structured? All of this, now you have to be the judge of it. Okay. And the very first thing that we had talked about is that when we are writing the introduction to the question, what we do is we explain the idea, and we also explain what is the issue there. What, not how. We discuss what? We discuss what. Clear? So what I do here is, in this question, I introduce the question by, no, providing that very idea. What? That is, first I do is I try and explain artificial intelligence and what is the role that artificial intelligence can play when it comes to administrative decision making. Okay. So what is, no, when we say artificial intelligence, how can we describe artificial intelligence? So we can say artificial intelligence is basically about the usage of technology. It's of course about the usage of technology, but it's not just the usage of technology. Artificial intelligence is something which helps us develop the capability to analyze large data. It helps us in understanding of patterns, and thereby, what does it do? It helps us making certain predictions. Okay. It helps us making certain predictions. So this could be a good way to start my answer, where I explain how in artificial intelligence what we do is we make use of technology, and we through the technology we analyze large data which is otherwise not possible if is being done by humans. Okay, so human cannot take up the the big data analysis which artificial intelligence can do, and similarly understand the patterns that are present there, and then make what, then make certain predictions or certain recommendations. Okay, so predictions or recommendations. Okay, and this is exactly how we use artificial intelligence for decision making. Because in artificial intelligence, what can be done? Artificial intelligence can help, administratively speaking, to take up data-based decisions. That means it can contribute to evidence-based decision making, evidence-based decision making, objectivity of decisions, objectivity of decisions, and thereby eliminate one very important problem that is there when it comes to human decision making, which is what? When you give humans that the power to take decisions, there is always a possibility of biasness. There is always a possibility of disvalues, attitudes impacting our decisions. So what does artificial intelligence does? Artificial intelligence helps in decision evidence based decision making, objective decisions, rather than decisions taken on the basis of some disvalues or on some attitudes or the moral standards which may not be appropriate. So this is basically what you write in the introduction, the what part. Okay, not the how part. Okay, because now in the body part of my answer I am going to introduce the how part, because as I said, if you go back, what how do we start writing the body part of my answer? Here primarily what we do is we first explain what exactly is the issue here. Okay, so what we are going to do is, first we are going to understand, in this particular question we are going to write about how can artificial intelligence act as a dependable source. Clear? So what does artificial intelligence do which allows artificial intelligence to become a dependable source? So we can always talk about the artificial intelligence having artificial intelligence doing what? Having the capability to uphold values of objectivity, or for that matter, no, when we talk about when we talk about values of efficiency. In no, also the concept of equality, or artificial intelligence can help us uphold the value of consistency. Okay, so these are some things which is the reason why artificial intelligence is basically preferred, है ना? Because what does it do? It brings objectivity, evidence based, because it is evidence based. Okay, decisions are based on facts. Decisions here are based on facts. Why efficiency? because the capability of artificial intelligence, it far exceeds the capability of human beings. Okay, so the capability to analyze data, the capability to analyze data is not something which can be replicated in human beings. This is something which is very, 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 no, the capability of only artificial intelligence, not human beings. Okay. Then comes equality. Why? Because artificial intelligence is not necessarily, or you can say may not be affected by biasness or disvalues. There is a possibility. What? There is a possibility that when humans are taking decisions, so humans are impacted by prejudices. They are impacted by some disvalues, stereotypes. These factors could very much influence the decision making done by humans, but not by necessarily when it is taken up by technology. And then comes consistency, meaning what? Meaning that the decisions that are there, it is based on the previous decisions, previous positives, negatives, and therefore what does it do? It brings about consistency of decisions. Even when individuals no may be different, but the decisions that are being taken, because it is being done through the no through the input of artificial intelligence, so consistency of decision making is there. So what does it do is artificial intelligence brings about institutionalization, of decisions. Okay, so it does not matter who is taking the decision, there is institutionalization. So these are the benefits that is there. This is the first paragraph. Of course, you may not necessarily get an opportunity to write so many things, so you have to make the most usage of what specific number of words that you can add. So there is always a way that you may come up with certain flow charts to address it, like this could be one of the ways that you address it. Okay, now, but this is not all what the question demands. The question does what? The question also demands that there are positive, because it says what? Look, go back to the question. The question says critically examine. So why is it a dependable source? We have addressed it, but it says critically examine. So can it always be a dependable source? That is a question mark. And that is where we have to see why, or what are the problems that are there. Okay. So in this case, what are we supposed to do? We are supposed to address the ethical concerns, the ethical concerns, the ethical concerns we are supposed to address this ethical concerns here. And there have been some very important issues, ethical issues, which have been raised related to artificial intelligence. And one of the ideas is exactly opposite to the problem that we had, to the positive that we had talked about, which is biasness and discrimination. Now, how is artificial intelligence? What is the problem here? You must have read about the fact that artificial intelligence primarily uses historical data, and because it uses historical data, there is always a possibility that the outcomes recommended can, no, it could still have biasness there. Okay, so because of the historical usage of historical data, so there could still be presence of certain biasness or discrimination. Okay, like historical data meaning what? So previously the decisions were taken by human beings, and if human beings are the ones who are taking those decisions, there is possibility of discrimination and bias. And if artificial intelligence uses the same data and analyzes the same data, comes to conclusion based on the same data, there is a possibility that the same problem exists here as well. Okay. Another problem with artificial intelligence is the lack of transparency part of it. Lack of transparency here. Now, when we say there is a lack of transparency here, what exactly do we mean by this? See, whenever we talk about the process of governance or the process of administration, the process of administration and governance requires something called as procedural fairness as well. Procedural fairness. It's not only about the efficiency achieved, but also about the procedure followed. That is also very important. And that is where what we see with artificial intelligence is that there is a lack of transparency. And this lack of transparency challenges the procedural fairness part of it. That means, how have we come to the outcomes, the recommendations, or the decisions taken? If I am using artificial intelligence, so what analysis, how those analysis have been done by, by artificial intelligence? How was that analysis done? I don't know anything about it. And that is where the procedural fairness or lack of it comes when it comes to artificial intelligence. Similarly, there is issues related to accountability. So there is an accountability deficit. Accountability deficit. Accountability deficit that has to be understood, because if there are artificial intelligence assisted decisions, who are to be held accountable for those decisions if it goes wrong? If such decisions goes wrong, who are to be held accountable? है ना? That is one very important issue. Is the civil servant to be held accountable, or is technology to be held accountable? If technology is to be held accountable, how do you hold technology accountable? Do you stop using it, or do the companies or the institutions who have come up with those technology, how do you hold them accountable? Clear? So that's an important challenge. And finally, there could also be issues related to privacy, surveillance, in fact, even digital divide. Digital divide. And you could address it as either 1 point or 2 points, and you can do what? You can accordingly address your answers. Okay. And of course, you can add examples wherever you are writing problems, or here you can add examples, because we are not writing this in paragraphs, and we are doing what? We are using a flow chart to address it. So here what you can do is you can write it in examples here itself. Okay. And then comes the conclusion part of it. Now, it is very difficult in such questions to be able to write a conclusion. Why? Because as it is the number of words and the time that is there, you have done what you may have exceeded that. So you have to practice it in such a manner that there the process of thinking comes down and you are ready with points. Like if I'm writing conclusions, as we know, we have previously talked about the fact that when we are talking about certain things, specifically when we are talking about applied ethics, we can always use what? We can always use our conclusions in the form of suggestions. Okay. So you can write about the fact that we cannot stop using artificial intelligence because today the technology that is available in the form of artificial intelligence, it has it has the potential to do a lot of good. So we cannot stop using it. That's not the answer. So what is required is certain suggestions could be done, could be made to understand how how it can be used in a better manner. And there what we can do is we can talk about no, we can talk about things like human oversight, the need for human supervision or human oversight, the need for making it more accountable, and no, making it more accountable and transparent. We can talk about a grievance redressal mechanism. There should be a mandatory grievance redressal mechanism present to address if there are issues related to algorithms, etc. So these points could be added and accordingly you can end this very answer. Clear? So see, now just think of it. If we if we follow this structured approach, I always feel that if you have a structure in mind and if you follow the structure in answer writing, you are very likely to come up with a better answer. If you know a lot of things but you do not follow the structure, there is a possibility that your answers, even though it may contain some good quality points, but may not be given the similar marks to an individual who has followed a structured approach, even if he has a lesser understanding, or even if he's lesser, comparatively less articulate than you are, but still his answers would be given, it would be marked more positively in comparison to yours. Okay, that is the reason why I always prefer following a structure. Clear? Anyways, let's do one more thing. Let us try and also see one more question and no, follow the same pattern, which now it will be very useful for you, because now when you practice it, always keep this structure in mind, and you can look at the video more than once, twice, thrice. And what happens is that when you are doing it, there is an involuntary response that your brain has, and whenever you are writing an answer related to applied ethics, you follow the same structure, even even if it is involuntary, but you follow that. So that is very important for us. Okay, anyways, let's come to the question that was asked in the year 2025. And what was the question asked? The question that was asked was related to social media. It says, in the present digital age, in the present digital age, social media has revolutionized. Social media has social media has revolutionized our way of communication, our way of communication our way of communication and interaction. However, it has raised several ethical issues it has raised several ethical issues, and challenges. And challenges. Describe the key ethical dilemmas. Describe the key ethical dilemmas Describe the key ethical dilemmas in this regard. Okay. So this is again a question. Again, you can see the question is to deal with it deals with applied ethics, because the question specifically demands your understanding and primarily you pointing out what are the ethical challenges, what are the ethical dilemmas related to social media. Again, if we follow the same structure that we have talked about, so how do I introduce this particular question? I introduce this question by starting with an understanding of social media and most importantly, what the first statement, as the first statement says, it has revolutionized our way of communication. So I mention how has social media revolutionized our means of communication. So what has social media done? Social media has revolutionized our communication, specifically when we talk about governance, because social media has done what? Social media has increased participatory governance, Not only has social media increased participatory governance, one of the greatest challenges that we have seen in Indian bureaucratic system is the fact that India has always been a India has always had a rule-based bureaucratic organization. It's always a rule-based. Now, what has social media done? Social media has addressed one of the major cause of this, which is social media has ensured that we are able to address even the issue of red tapeism, the delays that used to happen in the government processes. Social media has increased accountability, and because of the increase of accountability, what it has done is it has addressed the issue of red tapeism as well. So you will find that because of social media, because of the news that breaks on social media, because of the capability that social media has, that on one click it has the capability to reach billions of individuals. So what happens is that is where the accountability has increased. So today, if suppose there is an issue related to one particular, in one particular part of India, which has nothing to do with the rest of India. It is something which is an issue related to one specific organization, bureaucratic organization in one, maybe a remote part of India. But if those issues get highlighted on social media, the reach that is there, the reach is beyond conceptualization, है ना? The reach may be in billions, and therefore the accountability that is there, the accountability has, no, it has considerably improved. Okay? So what you can do is you can use this and introduce the question. Okay? Dekho, as I said, you are supposed to do what? You are supposed to describe it. But because, see, in social media, maybe writing a first sentence to describe social media may not be that effective. So rather than going for a description of social media, you could come up with the impact that social media has caused, primarily related to, because it has revolutionized communication system. And what is the impact that it has caused? It has affected participation, accountability, and has, it has contributed even to quick decision making in the government. And therefore it has completely revolutionized the way the governance is taken up. You can do what? You can add it here. Okay? Now, then comes the second part of it, that is the body part of your answer, where you are going to write about the challenges part. Okay? And this is very important because the question does what? The question specifically asks you, what exactly are the ethical dilemmas that has been created by social media, and what are the ethical dilemmas or ethical issues that social media has caused. Okay, though the question specifically asks about ethical dilemmas, but it also mentions ethical concerns and ethical issues. So we will address both of it in the answer. So if we are writing about ethical dilemmas, so what you have to understand is that ethical dilemmas related to social media is not just an ethical dilemma of social media, but overall technology. No, because technology has done what? Technology potentially has, obviously, because social media is the result of technology. So the ethical dilemmas that are related to technology also are ethical dilemmas related to social media. Okay, so you can talk about what? You can talk about certain ethical dilemmas like the dilemma of, it has created a dilemma of privacy versus surveillance that has happened. There is an issue related to hate speech, but at the same time freedom of expression or speech that is there. Okay, see, on one hand, social media can become a platform of liberty, but at the same time social media could also result into a surveillance state. Okay, so liberty, but at the same time it could do what? Create the possibility of a surveillance state. Okay, similarly, one issue with social media is the issue of autonomy versus, no, or the and why am I talking about autonomy? I'm talking about autonomy because when we are exposed to social media content, the algorithms that are there in social media, it possibly denies us the autonomy. Why? Because repeated presentation of similar content repeated presentation of similar content would deny us the capability to think freely, है ना? So there is always a concept of free will, and possibly what social media does is that it deprives us of our free will. That possibility is always there. That possibility is always there. Clear? So you could write these as what? You could write these as ethical dilemmas. Autonomy is important. Liberty is important. But at the same time, if there are, no, if we talk about human beings, ethics and morality of human beings is always, it is always judged on the basis of the fact that whether we act freely or not. And there is also always a possibility that social media does not allow us to do that. It manipulates our thinking, it manipulates our actions. It also has the capability of manipulating the attitudes and the moral standards or the values that we possess. So you could address that, Hannah. You have written it. See, whenever you are writing ethical dilemmas, always present ethical dilemmas in this manner, where you know, where you pitch one ethical dilemma or one value against the other. You are always supposed to put one value against the other. Okay, that is the way you always write about ethical dilemmas. Okay, that's the way you write about ethical dilemmas. Okay. One thing that you have seen here is that this kind of questions, when you're writing ethical dilemma, you cannot just write this and leave it up to the examiner. You are supposed to do what? You are supposed to describe them. So how is privacy an important value? But because of social media, there is a possibility of a violation of our privacy. Similarly, there, no, hate speeches is something that we see. No, we have seen so much of it when it comes to social media, because social media allows no, it allows anonymity, and anonymity can do what? Anonymity could cause problems like hate speeches or cyber bullying, these things. And but at the same time, if you know, if you violate it, it would result into maybe a violation of the fundamental right to freedom of speech and expression. Similarly, an explanation of how this could do what? How it could result into liberty, but at the same time, there could be a problem related to what? There could be a problem related to its surveillance, है ना? And then comes autonomy versus, you know, free will and all of this. So you write this part, okay? Then comes again, though this is what is asked here, but I would add, because it says ethical concerns and issues also, so you could add some specific problems as a part of ethical issues and ethical concerns here. Certain ethical issues, you could write issues related to what? You could issue you could write issues related to manipulation, or the same thing that we had talked about. It creates echo chambers. What creates echo chambers? So algorithms that are there, it creates echo chambers, because the same kind of content is repeatedly presented to us on our wall. So it creates that concept of echo chamber. Then there are issues related to it being a black box, something that I had mentioned earlier as well. You can write about cyber bullying, etc. Not a lot of points, just a few points. And then what you can do is you can conclude the answer. So conclusion would be what? Conclusion would be again the very concept of suggestions. So what could be the way forward? What could be the suggestions? Again, as we have already seen that we cannot no, we cannot simply end the usage of no, we cannot simply end the usage of technology, artificial intelligence, or the usage of social media platforms, etc. We cannot end its usage. So what we are supposed to do is we are supposed to come up with what could be the way forward to properly use it. So suggestions could be there, like there is a need to do what? There is a need to strengthen digital literacy. Digital literacy. So you can write about this, that how it becomes, because we live in this age of technology, so it is so important for us. It is so important for us that we understand that when it comes to technology, there is always a possibility that there could be some negative outcomes, and therefore we should be more informed and we should understand that what I see on social media platforms may not necessarily be the truth or complete truth. So the capability, the very no, the very ability that we have to see, to maybe authenticate what news we consume out of social media, that's what digital literacy is. Clear? Then comes again the concept of accountability. A very important aspect of it is accountability. And when we say accountability, what form of accountability? We are basically talking about content moderation, accountability towards the accountability of content moderation, the accountability of algorithms. We need to know about that. Okay, so that part, accountability for content moderations. There has to be accountability related to it. Okay, then at the same time we can also talk about we can also talk about protection of data privacy and so on. Protection of data privacy and so on. Clear? So again, this is how we can end this discussion. Okay, again you can observe one thing that according to me you would have observed, if you are if you are taking these sessions very seriously, and if you're trying to learn how to approach ethics answer writing, and you're implementing, practicing the way we are looking at answer writing, one thing that you would find is that the structure of your answers, the the quality of your answers, and the substance of your answer, these three things have undergone it should have undergone a considerable change. Okay, so again, before we meet in the next session, please practice this. Okay, please practice this, so that in the next week I will deal with two more classes related to no answer writing, that is section A part, and then we move on to the case study part. Okay, so next week two sessions I will take. In these sessions, in these two sessions, I will primarily be focusing on one more type of questions that are there, and once we have done with that, we will move on to the case study part. Okay, and I will be taking 2-3 sessions related to case studies itself, how you're supposed to answer case studies and so on. Clear? So please make use of it. Thank you everyone. We'll meet in the next session of ethics answer writing. Thank you so much.